She was the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar firm, powerful, feared, unshakable. But that night, she stood outside in a thunderstorm, soaked, lost, and holding her daughter's trembling hand. When a quiet single dad opened the door and offered them shelter, he didn't know she was his boss. And she didn't know. She was about to meet the man who would change her life forever. Before we dive in, drop a comment with where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit subscribe for more videos like this. Let's begin. Thunder slammed through the dark sky like a war drum, and the storm howled with a fury that rattled every window in Mason Carter's small wood-framed house. He had just tucked in his 6-year-old son, Liam, after finishing the dinner they could barely afford, mac and cheese again, when the knock came. It was sharp, urgent, desperate. Mason froze. Another knock. He opened the door. A tall woman stood on the porch, soaked to the skin, hair plastered to her face, clutching a small child close to her chest. Her lips were pale. Her heels were muddy. Her designer coat hung heavy with rain. But her eyes, they weren't asking. They were begging. "I'm sorry. My car slid off the road," she gasped. "Please, I just need a phone. A warm place for my daughter, just for a minute." Mason blinked, stepping aside before his thoughts could catch up. "Get inside. Now." The little girl, no older than 5, was shivering violently. Mason took one look and wordlessly pulled the blanket off his couch, wrapping it around her as she whimpered. "Thank you," the woman said, her voice cracking. She looked like she hadn't said those words in a very long time. Mason went into the kitchen to grab towels, but his mind was racing. There was something oddly familiar about her. The sharp jawline, the unmistakable presence. Number couldn't be. He returned and offered her the towel. "You're lucky this place has good insulation." She looked up, and for the first time, their eyes truly met. His heart skipped. Number it couldn't be. Caroline Blake, CEO of Blake Dynamics, the woman who signed his paychecks, his boss, the woman who'd once walked past him in a hallway without even noticing he existed. But now, she was curled up on his couch like a shattered storm herself. No assistant, no driver, no umbrella. Just a soaked mother holding her daughter as if the world had ended. "Is your daughter okay?" he asked gently. Caroline nodded, but she didn't speak. Not yet. He poured her tea without asking. Cheap grocery store brand. No lemon, no honey, just heat. She took it. Their fingers brushed. That's when Liam came down the hall, rubbing his eyes. "Dad, who's she?" Caroline turned toward the child and forced a smile through her cracked lips. "Hi. I'm Liam," he said. "Do you want to play dinosaurs?" The little girl peeked out from under the blanket. She nodded silently. Mason's heart twisted. He was barely scraping by. No money, no family support. He'd lost his wife in a fire that left scars deeper than the ones on his skin. But in that moment, nothing else mattered. He looked at Caroline, his powerful, ruthless CEO, now soaked, silent, and entirely human. And he made the decision. "You and your daughter can stay the night," he said. Caroline's eyes widened. "I can sleep on the floor," Mason added. "Liam and I have an air mattress." She didn't respond right away. But then, a single tear slipped down her cheek, and she nodded. And so, under one leaking roof, a struggling single dad and a broken CEO began a night that neither of them would ever forget. The rain hadn't let up. If anything, it beat harder against the windows, like it wanted in. Caroline sat stiffly on the couch, arms wrapped around her sleeping daughter. The girl had passed out from exhaustion, tiny fingers still holding onto one of Liam's plastic dinosaurs like a lifeline. Her damp hair curled across Mason's throw pillow. Mason knelt beside the fireplace, carefully striking a match. He hadn't used it in months. Couldn't afford the wood most winters. But tonight, he lit it anyway. One crackle, then another, and finally flames danced to life. He turned his head toward her. She needs the warmth more than I need the bill. Caroline looked away quickly, embarrassed. She wasn't used to kindness without a cost. He poured her more tea, hot this time, and handed her a dry hoodie from his closet. It was oversized, faded, smelled faintly of sawdust and lemon soap. She hesitated. "Look," he said, setting it beside her. "You don't have to prove anything here. This isn't a boardroom. It's just a living room." Caroline's lip twitched. Maybe it was a smirk. Maybe it was sorrow. She finally said, "I didn't think you recognized me." "I did," he replied softly, not looking at her. There was a long silence, broken only by the fire and the ticking of the old clock above it. "Why didn't you say anything?" Mason looked over his shoulder. His jaw was tense. "Because you didn't come here as a CEO." She met his gaze. He continued, "You came here as a mother." That's all I needed to know. For a woman used to deals and dominance, the simplicity of his words struck her like a punch to the gut. No one ever separated her from her title. No one had ever looked at her and seen anything but the money. Until now. She finally slipped into the hoodie. It was warm, rough around the edges, just like the man who'd offered it. "I was on my way to my ex's place," she murmured. "He was supposed to take our daughter for the weekend. I thought if I dropped her off, I could have one night. Just one night to breathe. But he canceled last minute. Again." Mason nodded but said nothing. Sometimes, silence was the best comfort. She looked at him differently now. His strong hands, his scarred wrist, the quiet way he moved around the house like he carried a weight he never spoke of. "You live alone?" she asked. He shook his head. "Me and Liam. Lost my wife 2 years ago." Her expression softened, a flicker of emotion cracking through her guarded exterior. "I'm sorry," she said, and this time she meant it. "It's okay," Mason replied. "He's the reason I keep going." She looked at Liam, sleeping on the floor with his arms wrapped around a pillow, and something twisted in her chest. "I never thought I'd say this," she whispered, "but I think I needed this storm." Mason raised an eyebrow. "To drive into a ditch?" "No," she said quietly. "To remind me I'm not bulletproof." Then, after a beat, "Do you ever feel like you're trying so hard to hold everything together, just so no one sees how close you are to falling apart?" Mason didn't hesitate. Every single day. Her throat tightened. There was no boardroom power here, no money to hide behind, no assistance, no tinted windows, just 2 broken parents, a storm, and a flickering fire. And somehow, that felt more honest than anything she'd experienced in years. As she pulled the hoodie closer, Caroline realized something she hadn't in a long time. She felt safe, not because she had control, but because, for once, someone else didn't ask her to be strong. And in that small house with squeaky floors and chipped paint, the walls didn't feel like they were caving in. They felt warm. The fire had dulled to a soft glow when the third knock came. Not a panicked bang like Caroline's. This one was heavier, controlled, familiar, like someone who believed they had every right to be standing at that door. Mason rose slowly. Caroline sat up straighter, suddenly rigid. Her arms instinctively tightened around her daughter. Mason opened the door, and there he was. Derek Halston, Caroline's ex-husband. A man in a sleek raincoat, hair immaculately combed despite the downpour. Standing like he owned every square foot of the earth he walked on. His expensive umbrella dripped onto Mason's doormat like it couldn't be bothered to apologize. "I've been looking for her," Derek said without preamble. His voice was sharp, entitled. "She didn't answer her phone." "She's safe," Mason replied flatly. "You can relax." Derek's eyes darted inside, over Mason's shoulder. "Is that your house? This shack?" Caroline stood up behind Mason. "Derek, what are you doing here?" "I came to get my daughter," he said. "You said you'd bring her." "I didn't say I'd deliver her like a package," she snapped. "And you bailed on us. Again." "I had a meeting." Mason stepped aside just enough to keep himself between them. Caroline's voice was colder now. "It's midnight. You think you can just show up at a stranger's house and—" Derek laughed bitterly. "Stranger? This is your employee, Caroline. He's your janitor. What is this? Some pity project?" Mason didn't flinch. He just looked at Caroline. She met his gaze and didn't look away. Derek added, "You should come home. You don't belong here." Caroline's jaw tightened. "No, Derek, you don't belong here." Derek's smirk vanished. "You always want to be the hero," he said through gritted teeth. "Well, you've got your moment, but don't pretend this life suits you." Mason didn't speak. He didn't have to. Because Caroline stepped forward, voice trembling with steel. "This life gave me something you never did. Respect." Derek scoffed and glanced at Mason. "You think this guy respects you? He probably thinks this is his golden ticket." Mason finally spoke low and steady. "I didn't know who she was when I opened that door." Derek snorted. "Yeah, sure." "I still don't care," Mason added. "All I saw was a mother in trouble. You're just a man who shows up when it's convenient." The silence that followed was heavier than the storm. Caroline whispered, "Leave, Derek, before I make this official in court." His eyes darkened, but he turned on his heel and walked back toward his car. As the headlights disappeared down the road, Mason closed the door quietly. The tension didn't leave the room. It simmered like the storm outside. Caroline sat back down, hands shaking. "I'm sorry." "You don't owe me anything," Mason said. "Especially not an apology for someone else's mess." She exhaled, long and slow. "He's always had this way of making me feel small." "You're not," Mason said. Caroline looked up. "You walked into a stranger's house during a storm to protect your daughter. That's not small. That's strength." She wiped her eyes, laughing through it. "You're good with words, for a janitor." He grinned. "Don't tell anyone." The fire crackled between them. Outside, the storm began to quiet. Inside, something else was stirring. Not romance yet, not trust, but maybe the beginning of both. A breath, a pause, a shared glance that said, "I see you, and I don't need you to be anything but real." And for the first time in years, that was enough. The storm had moved on by morning, but the tension hadn't. Mason was in the kitchen packing Liam's lunch while Caroline sat quietly at the small table, sipping coffee from a mug that had a chipped cartoon dinosaur on it. Her daughter, Amelia, giggled in the living room with Liam. Two kids who didn't know the world outside their laughter was unraveling. Caroline hadn't said much since Derek left. Mason glanced at her. "You sleep okay?" She nodded, but the exhaustion in her eyes said otherwise. He passed her a plate of toast and eggs. "Eat something?" She hesitated. "It's not 5-star. Mason's added, "But it's real." She took a bite, chewed slowly, and for the first time in a while, she didn't taste plastic. After a pause, she whispered, "I'm being audited." Mason looked up. "My company," she said. "Blake Dynamics. There's something wrong. My CFO flagged irregularities 2 months ago, then disappeared. I thought it was a mistake. But I'm starting to think," her voice broke, "I'm being set up." Mason leaned back, silent. "I didn't want to believe it," she continued. "But yesterday I found a hard drive in a drawer at my office. I plugged it in and found records, offshore accounts, shell companies, money laundering. Under my name. You think your CFO was laundering through your company?" She nodded. "And now I'm the fall girl." Mason exhaled slowly. "I couldn't tell anyone," she said. "Not my board, not my lawyers. Derek would have used it to take full custody of Amelia. So I ran. And I ended up here." "Not by accident," Mason said gently. She looked up. "Sometimes," he continued, "the worst storms push us exactly where we need to be." Her eyes brimmed, but she blinked quickly. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "If this gets out, everything I built, it's gone." He stared at her for a long moment. "You trust me?" Caroline hesitated, then nodded. Mason walked to a drawer and pulled out a laptop, not sleek, not new, but working. "Show me," he said. "What?" "I fix things," he replied. "Not just floors and pipes. I've worked in tech before all this." He stopped, before the fire, before the scars, before everything changed. Caroline stared at him like he was a stranger again. "You're not just a janitor," she said quietly. "No," Mason replied. "But you're not just a CEO either." She connected the drive and showed him the files. Spreadsheets, encrypted transfers, ghost vendor accounts. Mason scanned quickly, faster than she expected. "These are clever," he murmured. "But not invisible." He pointed. "Here, look at these timestamps. They were made from inside your building, probably from the boardroom server." Caroline's eyes widened. "One of the executives?" He nodded. "Someone close, someone smart, but arrogant enough to think no one would double-check." She leaned back, stunned. "You really know what you're doing." "I used to build systems for law firms," he said, "until my wife died. Then I stopped being useful to the people who needed me." He looked down, swallowed. "Until Liam gave me a reason again." She studied him carefully. "And now you're giving me one." He smiled faintly. "It's what dads do." She didn't speak, didn't blink, because no one, no lawyer, no colleague, no advisor, had said anything that simple, that kind, that human. "I want to fight back," she said. "I want to expose them." "Then you'll need help," Mason replied. "And a safe place." He looked around. "This isn't much, but I've got an attic, old files, hard drives. You want to find the truth? We dig from here." Caroline stared at the scar on his wrist, the worn lines on his hands, the strength behind the quiet. And she realized she was no longer falling alone. She had someone who wouldn't let her hit the ground. 3 weeks later, Caroline Blake stood on the edge of the Blake Dynamics rooftop, dressed in black, wind in her hair, press cameras flashing from across the street. The skyline behind her sparkled like everything she was about to leave behind. But she wasn't running anymore. Not this time. Not with Mason at her side. It started 2 weeks earlier in Mason's attic, surrounded by old hard drives and coffee cups, with Liam and Amelia playing on the floor below like the world wasn't on fire. Caroline hadn't returned to the office, not even once. Mason told her, Don't go back until you're ready to burn it down. And she didn't. But while the city thought she'd vanished, she was working, digging through every file, every hidden trail, every silent betrayal. Mason set up a shadow system from a donated server at the local library. She contacted the one person she could trust, her old mentor, retired Judge Marianne Dorsey, a woman who taught her to swing first and regret later. Together, they built a case. Illegally, maybe. Quietly, absolutely. Ruthlessly, definitely. They traced the money to one name: Victor Lang, Caroline's COO. The man who toasted her birthday, called Amelia his office niece, and quietly drained her company while charming the board. It was all there. Falsified invoices, rerouted bonuses, and hush payments tagged under wellness stipends. But Caroline didn't go to the authorities. Number She called a press conference. "You ready for this?" Mason asked, adjusting the tiny mic on her collar. Caroline nodded. "I wasn't ready for motherhood. I wasn't ready for divorce. I wasn't ready for being abandoned in a storm." She turned to him. "But I'm ready for this." He gave a small nod. "Then go remind them who you are." As the cameras rolled and the live stream hit 1 million views in under a minute, Caroline stepped up to the podium. No teleprompter, no PR team, no script, just truth. "I founded Blake Dynamics in a garage," she said. "I built it with grit, not greed. But recently I discovered someone I trusted, betrayed every value this company stands for." She paused. Deep breath. "Victor Lang has been embezzling millions from our accounts for nearly 3 years. He framed me, tried to erase my legacy. But I have evidence and a message." She clicked the remote. Behind her, on the giant screen, spreadsheets, routing numbers, hidden cameras in the server room, every single piece of proof. The crowd erupted, but she didn't flinch. "Let this be a warning to anyone who thinks silence buys safety. You underestimated the wrong woman." The building shook, not literally, but with the roar of vindication. Hours later, Caroline stood in the company's boardroom. Victor was in cuffs. The board members sat in stunned silence as she cleared her throat. "I hereby resign as CEO." Gasps, confusion. "I'll take an advisory role for 1 year, and I'm promoting someone else." She turned toward the door, and Mason walked in, clean-shaven, wearing a borrowed suit that still didn't hide the calluses on his hands or the truth in his eyes. A janitor turned systems analyst turned unofficial partner. This man found the holes none of you saw. He saved your company, he saved your jobs, and you never looked twice at him. Mason's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. He didn't need to. Later that night, in Mason's driveway, Caroline buckled Amelia into her booster seat while Liam waved from the porch. She turned to Mason quietly. "I never said thank you." "You did," he replied. "Every time you didn't give up." Caroline reached into her bag, pulled out a set of keys. "Blake Dynamics is yours too now. I've made sure of it. Advisory shares, permanent position, whatever you want." He stepped back. "I just want to keep fixing things." She smiled. "Then fix us too." Mason blinked. "You mean, I'm not asking for forever, just the next storm." He didn't answer. He pulled her close instead and kissed her. The kind of kiss that doesn't promise perfection, just honesty and presence. And maybe, finally, peace. Caroline rebuilt her life from the ground up, this time with roots. Mason repaired more than just systems. He helped fix a future. And their children grew up knowing that not every storm destroys. Some storms deliver exactly who you're meant to meet. And when they knock, you open the door.